Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 244, Making Hybrid Working Inclusive. There has been so much nonsense spouted about how people need to get back to the office because teamwork only happens when people are face to face. And by extension, therefore, leaders are suggesting that inclusivity is only possible when we're all in the same room. You probably know what I'd say to that, don't you? Poppycock! So in this episode, I'll be backing up my comment with researched statistics, a few pragmatic ideas and a simple nudge. Firstly, I do need to acknowledge that inclusion covers a wide remit, and for the purpose of this episode, aligned with my work, I'll be focusing on introvert inclusion and the thorny challenge of hybrid working. I also acknowledge the intersectionality that exists within this issue. Why would I start by saying that hybrid working is a thorny challenge when many of us have enjoyed the benefits of working from home over the past few years? In my opinion, it's being made thorny when there really was no need. How quickly many leaders seem to have forgotten how their organisation was saved by their workforce being able to work from home. And yes, I know it didn't suit everyone, but at that time, for those who could, it was a must. We weren't given a choice. New bits of tech were hurriedly ordered and dispatched to home addresses. Temporary desks were set up around a dining room table, and the sale of headsets must have exploded exponentially. Given the situation we all faced, we made it work. Since then, many businesses have reduced their office space to the point where for some of my clients, they can't all go back into the office at the same time anyway. And now we're experiencing a period of executive nostalgia where leaders are craving for things to go back to normal. We've all heard the tales of employees being forced to return to the office with hardly enough notice to get childcare, etc. sorted out. Hence, the thorns are being rebred into what were previously pretty smooth stems of working, relatively speaking anyway. The most frustrating thing for me is this nostalgia for the way things were, rather than intelligent curiosity to make things better. To me, it seems like pure laziness. But worse than that, it's the willful rejection of the opportunity to improve working conditions, employee engagement, and therefore employee well-being. So all of those organisations who say on their website that our people are our most valuable asset are showing their true colours. As we know, culture is not what we put on a poster, it's how we behave in the day-to-day reality of business. So let's look at some of the statistics around hybrid working to lay a firm foundation. I'll keep them brief and relevant, and I've provided the data sources in the episode page. Pre-pandemic, fewer than 5% of us routinely worked from home. This shifted to 43% in April 2020, and we know the reasons why. And since the lockdowns were lifted, 78% of those who worked from home said that their work-life balance had improved. And whilst you may remember that I have decided that work-life balance is an illusion, and I'm now choosing to dance the work-sleep-fun tango, I get the sentiment, which is there's more to life than work. Given those changes, here are some things that we need to address in order to make hybrid working inclusive, because 80% of workers say that flexibility is important to job satisfaction. Now, this really isn't surprising to any of us, So leaders need to take this seriously. 75% of millennials and Gen Z say that they would look for a new job if return to office was mandated. Well, that has been put to the test by the likes of Amazon, Dell and EY in recent weeks. 60% feel less connected to their colleagues. Now, this I find interesting, as I don't know many introverts who would complain about that, so maybe the 60% are mostly extroverts. It's a possibility. 55% of us reported concentrating better when we work from home. You can include me in that statistic. 51% reported increased productivity. Now, we're going to come back to this a few times, as isn't that what organisations want? Surely one of the things they measure is productivity. Last couple, 30% work more hours remotely. With many people reporting that they struggle to stop working. I know that when I worked from home during the early 1990s, yep, I was one of those people who were part-time in the London office and part-time at home. I started work at the time I would be leaving for my long commute to that office and finished work when I would have been arriving home. Even now, as my desk is just upstairs, if I think of something, it's all too easy to pop back to work after supper. Finally, 21% never want to work from home again. Interesting. And this could be for a number of reasons. Maybe the home setup was not conducive to work. Maybe some found it too lonely, especially if they live alone. Maybe there was even a bit of FOMO, and they could be right. So I'll talk a little bit about that later too. I know that some of you who listen are leaders or aspire to be, and others have the ability to influence leaders. So here are some of the ways to create introvert inclusive hybrid working that also addresses the statistics I've just mentioned. Of course, they are about taking a leap forward rather than trying to hang on to outdated practices. But isn't that what good leadership is all about? It's fair to say that there will be caveats with some of these, and you'll notice a degree of symbiosis. You might find that some of my ideas seem pretty radical on first hearing, but they really aren't. They are new ways of working that align with the needs and expectations of today's employees, and they deliver the best results. Make no mistake, some leaders are going to be really uncomfortable with my ideas and have their standard raft of why things can't change. I'm not interested in stroking egos and pandering to the past. I'm here for the change that's needed. Of course, a few uncomfortable themes emerge like trust, grown-up conversations, and courage, as you might expect, and they will add to the discomfort. Are you ready? I've got 5 big ideas to share. Number 1. Rather than mandating that everyone has to be back in the office full-time or even a certain number of days per week, consult with your team and agree who does what on an individual basis. So for those 21% who never want to work at home again, they can be in the office full-time, whilst those who are more productive and can concentrate better can spend more time working from home. This is the kind of flexibility that the 80% said they wanted. And while we're at it, does the work have to always be done in traditional hours? Lots of solo work that needs focus and attention can be completed asynchronously. As an introvert, knowing that I can take a break to recharge without being accused of shirking would make a massive difference. And if you can't manage those kinds of adult conversations and arrangements, there's something deeply flawed in the leadership of your team. it may also enable you to keep more of the millennials and Gen Zers who would have been looking for a job elsewhere. Will it take a different kind of organisation? Absolutely. Is it possible? Definitely. Number 2, assess people and performance manage them based on their output and results, not on presenteeism. I've been in an office where people squander far too much time wandering around, talking and socialising, and not nearly enough time getting the work done. And being frank here, it's hardly ever the introverts who are the roving reporters. Being in the office is not the same as being productive. In the same way, being or looking busy is not the same as doing productive work either. But these are difficult lessons for blinkered leaders to accept. Grown-up conversations again. Why, oh why, are so many managers and leaders fearful of having those necessary conversations? In my book, they're not earning their salary as they are neglecting a fundamental part of their role. Number 3, as we're starting to move into the territory of new ways of working, we need to move beyond the illusion that sitting next to someone is connection. I have an entirely remote team based around the world in different time zones, and I feel more connected to them than I felt with many of my colleagues that I happened to share an office with. In the same way that being busy is not the same as being productive, sitting next to someone is not the same as connection. Listening to what people did at the weekend and hearing their jokes and banter is not the same as meaningful connection for we introverts. Real connection and rapport takes effort and intention, as I discussed in the episode about being present. So as leaders, we need to consciously connect with our team members and colleagues. We need to understand what makes them tick. We need to get to know them at a deeper level than their job description. And that takes time, especially for we introverts. Number 4, another area linked to connection where we need to make some change is around how we consciously include people when they are not in the office. Some teams have mandated that the whole team is in the office on specific days, which can work, but only if we include some team-wide communication or activity whilst they are there. And more importantly, we need to do that wherever team members are. It might be helpful to know that you don't need to touch base with we introverts if there's no real reason, but we do need to know we are valued and integral to the team. So leaders need to get creative about how to include people working remotely so they know they belong and are not missing out on the spontaneous learning opportunities. We know that learning is not a passive process, so we need to focus on the ambient learning opportunities. How? Take people to meetings with you. Capture any magic moments and share them as ahas at the start of regular meetings. Copy people in on email exchanges so they see how you do things. Debrief client meetings with those who weren't there if there's learning to be had. Get creative. The lack of ambient learning is not an excuse to call for a return to the office, as only a few in close proximity who weren't already engaged in something will have gleaned the learning anyway. Finally, number 5. This highlights another problem to be addressed: proximity bias. Now, this does form part of the extroversion bias, and as we're looking at creating introvert inclusion here, it's time we stopped favouring those literally in our line of sight. The fact that they are in the office does not, I repeat, does not signify greater commitment. It means they prefer to be in the office, probably for their own reasons. which may include them never wanting to work from home again, missing their workmates, and/or trying to impress you and earn brownie points. And that's still not the same as being committed or competent, actually. So look at your own behaviour and beliefs to ensure that you're not perpetuating bias and preventing genuine inclusion. Ask for feedback about what's working and what isn't from the team as a whole and from individuals and on a regular basis. And make sure that you explore that feedback as a conversation so you really understand it. If your team members know that they have the opportunity to influence the situation, engagement and well-being increase. Now, I think those 5 are enough to get the ball rolling, don't you? In essence, we're talking about up-levelling our leadership mindset, shifts in policy and procedure, and the courage to be and do differently. I grant you that that's not easy, but in my mind it's essential, and not just for introvert inclusion, although that's my primary consideration, but for wholesale inclusion. Is that even a thing? Well, it is now. It would stop the focus on specific sections of society and encourage us to focus human by human, because we are all different. And lumping us together and implementing a generic solution is never going to work for everyone. Okay, maybe I am being a bit too idealistic, but that's what I'd prefer. If you'd like a conversation with me about how to make your workplace or team more inclusive in this hybrid world, then please book some time in my calendar by emailing my team at quietly@flourishingintroverts.com. I remember saying early on in lockdown just how fortunate we were that the global pandemic didn't happen even 5 years earlier. The reality is we have never been so well provided for with collaboration tools and technology. Sure, we can stay in old school last century ways of working, but that's not where we are anymore, and it's not where we need to be going. The future is ahead of us, not behind us. So here's your nudge. These times call for changes in mindset by today's and tomorrow's leaders. Be creatively bold in the changes you're exploring, proposing and implementing. Fortune favours the brave after all. I doubt that you'll get it right all of the time, but that's not the point. The point is to work together to make hybrid working inclusive, because it's here to stay for the majority of businesses. Now is not the time to go back to what was, because that wasn't working anyway. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.